Chapter 5: Jewish Choral Music in the Great European 19th Century Synagogues. The fifth in a series of podcasts on the history and nature of Jewish choral music. In this chapter, we will look at Michele Bolaffi in Livorno, Italy, and Jewish synagogue composers in early America. Outstanding musical traditions were created in Livorno, Italy, by David Garcia and Michele Bolaffi. Michele Bolaffi was a figure of international stature, having served as composer, conductor, accompanist, poet, essayist, and translator. His career brought him from Italy to England, Germany, and France. The opening of the new Livorno synagogue in 1789 was marked by special musical performances led by Bolaffi. There was an organ in the new synagogue, and art music was played at weddings. We know very little about Michele Bolaffi. He was born in Livorno. In 1822, he went to Venice as a tutor in the household of the lawyer Alessandro Vivanti. He was chapel master at the court of Louis XVIII, and then at the court of Tuscany in Livorno. He composed several secular works that were published in Florence and Venice. In 1826, Bolaffi published a collection of choral settings of the synagogue liturgy entitled Versetti posti in musica, 14 compositions for one or two solo voices, choir, and basso continuo, including one piece with full orchestra. Bolaffi composed Mismor le David, a setting of Psalm 29, for a performance by choir and keyboard at a festive occasion in the Livorno synagogue. His composition actually became so popular that by the beginning of the 20th century, it was being sung as a monophonic hymn in synagogues around the world and was assumed to be a Sephardic folk song. The first Jews to settle in North America were Sephardic merchants from Amsterdam who had originally settled in Brazil. In the 1600s, they were forced to leave Brazil, and many emigrated to New York, which was then New Amsterdam. Other significant communities were established in Newport, Rhode Island, Charleston, South Carolina, and Savannah, Georgia. In 1654, a group of Sephardic Jews established Congregation She'erit Yisrael on Mill Street in New York City. The first permanent synagogue building in America, She'erit Yisrael, on Mill Street in New York City in 1730. The Touro Synagogue, built in 1763 in Newport, Rhode Island, is America's oldest surviving synagogue. It was established by Sephardic immigrants. At first, only the traditional monophonic chant could be heard in the liturgy of the Sephardic Jews. But eventually, many of the chants were arranged for chorus, modeled after the style of the German Jewish reformers. The 1840s and 1850s saw waves of Jewish immigration from German-speaking countries. Soon the German Jews would outnumber the Sephardic Jews. And the German Jews brought with them the praxis of the new Reform temples. Congregation Har Sinai was established in Baltimore in 1842. Catering to the new German immigrants, it was the first synagogue in America to follow the Reform ritual since its inception. Alois Kaiser was an American cantor and composer, considered to be the founder of the American cantorate. Kaiser was born in Sobotist, Hungary. He received his early education in the religious school of the Vienna Congregation, and then studied at the Teachers' Seminary and Conservatory of Music in Vienna. From the age of 10, he sang in the choir of Cantor Solomon Zulzer, and from 1859 he himself served as cantor in synagogues in Vienna and Prague. Kaiser arrived in New York City in June 1866, and in the following month was appointed cantor of the Oheb Shalom congregation in Baltimore, Maryland. Together with Samuel Welsh, Moritz Goldstein, and J.L. Rice, Kaiser produced Zimrat Yah, liturgical songs consisting of Hebrew, English, and German psalms and hymns, systematically arranged for the Jewish rite with organ accompaniment, in 4 volumes issued between 1871 and 1886, a self-published anthology of music for the American synagogue. The prominent Rabbi Isaac Meyer Weiss praised the project, writing, "Music in numerous instances is a more adequate expression of prayer than words can do it. Few, if any, can resist the inspiring influence of grand choral music. The evidence to support this hypothesis is before us every Sabbath in the temple. And the editors of this anthology promised, "The editors of Zimrat Yah will therefore make an effort to incorporate those masterpieces, as well as those traditional melodies that have become embedded in the hearts of the Jewish community, and even those worthy on their own musical merits, into the new and contemporary texts, thus preserving these treasures for public worship, including independent organ preludes as well as an organ accompaniment for each piece." The contents of this anthology included compositions by the editors, arrangements by the editors of traditional melodies, as well as compositions by some of the great European cantors, including Sulzer, Naumburg, and Weintraub. And these compositions were also arranged by the editors. Here is the first page of a hymn by Kaiser from Zimrat Yah. The text is in German, but with an English alternative. With its major scale, homophonic texture, and strict meter, it fits solidly within the Western European style. In 1892, the Central Conference of American Rabbis entrusted Kaiser, along with William Sparger, with the compilation of the musical portion of a hymnal for the Reform movement called the Union Hymnal, first published in 1897. The second edition of the Union Hymnal, appearing in 1914, reflected the Reform movement's attitude about the status of the Jews in America. The editors wrote in the preface, "All melodies for the Sabbath should be in joyous strain, in major rather than in a minor key, because of a very definite conviction that the Jew has come down to a modern day in a spirit of victory, and that the atmosphere of the American Reform congregation should be a reflection of the position, the culture, and the attainments of the Jew in this free and joyous land." Here is a hymn, "All Hail the Lord of Hosts," by Alois Kaiser, from the 1914 edition of the Union Hymnal. The language is English. The mode is fully major. The harmonic, language, texture, and style are very similar to American Christian hymns from this period.
All hail the Lord of hosts, our King, attuned to psalm each voice shall ring, to swell the choir that shall proclaim the power and glory of his name.
The hymn "Onward, Brothers" is an adaptation of Beethoven's Ode to Joy from his Ninth Symphony.
Onward, brothers, march still onward, side by side and hand in hand. We are bound for man's true kingdom. We are an increasing band. Though the way seems often doubtful, like the toil which we endure, though at times our courage falter, yet the promised land is sure.
The editors were clearly copying the adaptation "Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee," with lyrics written in 1907 by Henry Van Dyke, which is found in many Christian hymnals. Samuel Welsh was born in Prague but received his education in Vienna, where he studied with the famed cantor Solomon Zulzer. Sometime after the age of 25, he returned to Prague, where he was involved in the Arion Singing Society and eventually appointed cantor at the Meisel Synagogue. In 1865, Welsh immigrated to the United States to accept a position as cantor at New York's Ahavat Chesed congregation, whose membership was, as was Welsh, largely from Bohemia. At Ahavat Chesed, Welsh organized a choir in which men and women sang together. The liturgical choir even included several non-Jews. As we mentioned above, Welsh was one of the driving forces and one of the major editors of the Reformed Jewish hymnal Zimrath Yah. In 1880, after witnessing the deterioration of congregational support for his choral activities and the reduction of his salary, Welsh decided to leave congregation Ahavat Chesed and returned to Prague. Before departing, Welsh was feted by the prominent American cantors who wrote, "You were the best. You created melodies for our worship which, friend, will outlive you and will be a lasting, honorable memory to your name." In 1869, Welsh composed a setting of Psalm 93, Der Herr ist König, which he dedicated to his mentor, cantor Solomon Zulzer. Although published in America, the language of this music book is primarily German, with only minimal English translation. In the next chapter, chapter 6, we will look at the rise of Jewish secular community choruses in Eastern Europe and subsequently in other major Jewish urban centers.